Treasures of Sudanese Sufism, Journey Through Heritage Books and Manuscripts, the Book of طبقات وضيف الله. Sources of the book. Welcome to a new episode in our documentary series on Muhammad Noor وضيف Allah. As we continue our journey through his enduring work, كتاب طبقات, we pause today to examine one of its most important aspects, the sources upon which the author relied in constructing his documentary material and producing this remarkable historical work. Welcome and join us in this new scholarly reflection. So, a new encounter, a new meeting with Muhammad Noor وضيف Allah with his renowned book كتاب طبقات. And in this episode, I would like the audience to share the sources upon which وضيف Allah relied and depend in writing his documentary material. So I'm so very pleased to welcome you once again. Stay with us. So the sources upon which Muhammad Noor وضيف Allah relied can essentially be grouped into two principal categories. The first consists of oral narratives transmitted by ordinary people, disciples, and the popular traditions circulated among them concerning saints, scholars, and their miracles. The second comprises information conveyed by shuyukh, jurists, and members of the Sufi orders. Together, these two sources formed the backbone of his material, enabling him to produce a work that combines historical documentation with popular spiritual narration. So in more concise words, I would like to inform that وضيف Allah to write his noted book كتاب طبقات, it has been stated that he depended on two major sources, and these major sources may be summarized as follows: oral traditions and written sources is the first source. Widely circulated and recurrently transmitted accounts. وضيف Allah recorded these popular and recurrent narratives without subjecting them to criticism or commentary. So just I would like to share furthermore more details about these two sources in which وضيف Allah has relied in order to write his book the book of طبقات. So it has been stated that Allah recorded these popular and recurrent narratives. So he used to listen to narrators and then record what they have said. And it has been told that he just recorded without subjecting what has been said to him to criticism or commentary. Rather, he adopted the stance of a faithful transmitter. As Dr. and Professor Yusuf Hassan observed, despite his broadening learning, and as a matter of fact, as we have presented with the Allah biography, we have informed that he is a scholar, a jurist, and a man of knowledge. Allah was not a historian in the modern sense of the term, one who adheres to precision and objectivity in selecting material and subsequently subjects it to critical analysis and interpretation. So I'm quoting from the biography writers of Muhammad Nur Allah. Allah himself explained his methodology in the introduction to the book, and I would like to share this information once again. When he said, "A group of brethren, may God shower his blessing upon us and upon them, and grant us and them the highest ranks of paradise through the sanctity of the master of the sons of Adnan, asked me to record the history of the kingdom of the Sudan and to mention the merits of its distinguished senates. I responded to their request after seeking divine guidance through the prescribed prayer and inspiration. For neither our predecessors nor theirs had composed such work. Their stories, however, are recited among both the elite and the common people, and some have reached the level of recurrent transmission, tawatur. Therefore, I wish to record those reports that became famous and recurrently transmitted, since according to the scholars of the legal theory, recurrent reports are among the categories of certain knowledge that remove doubt, uncertainty, and conjecture. Such were the words of Muhammad Nur commenting on the idea behind writing his book, طبقات, and at the same time showing his methodology that he followed. Just he told that he used to listen and to record from the narrators what they used to say about a particular event or about a particular figure. Well, further explained that he followed the example of scholars of hadith, prophetic tradition, jurists, and historians who had previously authored works on history and geography. Professor Yusuf Hassan, the editor of كتاب طبقات, wrote regarding the book's sources. The sources of the book may be divided into two main categories: oral traditions and written sources. The overall structure of طبقات clearly indicates that Allah relied heavily upon oral narratives transmitted among people concerning scholars and senates. This reliance is unsurprising, given the scarcity of local written works, which compel the author to depend upon traditions transmitted from one generation to another. It is as if he sensed that this method might expose the content to some degree of alteration. He therefore dispelled such concerns by affirming that these accounts were recited among both the elite and the common people, and that he selected only those reports that had become famous and recurrently transmitted. The author frequently attributed specific reports to identifiable sources such as his father, his maternal uncle Musa Udriya, Dafa'allah ibn Sheikh Zain al-Abidin, and others. Whenever he doubted a report, he prefaced it with the expression, "It is said." The material of طبقات further demonstrates that despite his extensive knowledge, Allah was not a historian in the modern academic sense who critically evaluates and analyzes his sources. Rather, he served primarily as a transmitter of inherited narratives. In discussing the sources of كتاب طبقات and its heavily dependence on oral tradition, it is important to recognize that oral transmission constituted a fundamental repository for receiving wisdom, knowledge, and historical memory within the Sudanese heritage. However, by its very nature, oral transmission remains vulnerable to the limitations of human memory, variations in narration, and the accumulation of additions and interpretation over time. Consequently, the transition from oral culture to written documentation necessitates the application of rigorous methodological scrutiny to such narratives in order to perceive historical accuracy and safeguard the cultural value of society. In this context, journalist Zuhair Osman Ahmed draws attention to the nature of Allah's طبقات as a text shaped by popular narration and collective memory. Noting, within the realm of Sudanese history, oral transmission stands as a witness to the circulation of wisdom and knowledge. Yet, at the same time, it suffers from the ambiguities of memory and the fluctuations of narration, casting doubt upon the accuracy of what is transmitted and recorded. This reality imposes upon us the responsibility of verification and critical examination in order to perceive the authenticity of Sudan's cultural heritage. Professor Yusuf Al-Hassan also wrote in the introduction to the second edition, "I wish to emphasize that Allah's طبقات, which he chronicles the class of senates, righteous men, and jurists during the French period, is a truthful mirror of the religious, spiritual, cultural, and social life of the Sudanese people, and an authentic record of their religious beliefs, regardless of our opinions concerning them." The author documented those narratives that became famous and recurrently transmitted without criticism or commentary, assuming instead the role of a faithful narrator Nevertheless, he left us abundant information about Sudanese beliefs, many of which constitute the historical roots of practices that continue to exist in contemporary Sudan. These are important characteristics of that era that cannot be ignored or underestimated. Similarly, الشاطر البصيلي wrote in a footnote describing the book of طبقات. This book deserves a specialized study from multiple perspectives. Foremost among them, the verification of its contents and the purification of any additions that may have been inserted for particular purposes. These observations suggest that historians and researchers should approach the contents of the book according to established principles of verification, critical examination, objectivity, analysis, and commentary before accepting its contents as fully established historical facts. The narratives should be treated as texts requiring investigation rather than unquestioned historical certainties. However, reality suggests otherwise. Many of Allah's narratives have gradually come to be treated as established historical facts, reproduced by historians and researchers from one study to another without sufficient scrutiny concerning their authenticity and reliability. So the audience, as you listen, I have shared, by the way, the sources through which Allah has relied on to write his ever first Sudanese recorded and written book, and that is the book of طبقات, and the biography writers, the researchers, have stated in this particular context that Allah has depended on two major sources. That is the oral traditions, and in fact the oral tradition, the oral narrations, is a dominant source throughout the book pages. And furthermore, the widely circulated and recurrently transmitted accounts, and in other words, Allah depend on oral traditions and written sources from a side, and the widely circulated and recurrently transmitted accounts that used to be narrated either by shuyukh, by the followers and disciples of the Sufi order adherents. To present this episode, the audience have relied on the following sources. عمر محمد الأمين, his article وقفة مع بعض المرويات الشفوية والسماعيات والحكايات المؤسسة للشخصية السودانية في كتاب الطبقات. Published article in Sudan Nile on 15 of August 2023. زهير عثمان حمد, كتاب طبقات وضيف الله بين التراث الشفاهي ومعايير النقد الحديث. Published article on Sudan Nile on 11 of May 2024. And finally, the book titled تصحيح المرويات في طبقات وضيف الله, دراسة توثيقية تحليلية في أخبار الشيخين محمد الهميم وباء النقد الضرير. Book under publication by Dr. Abdullah Saleh. By this, the audience, I come to the end of the episode. Seeing you in another episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.